Greetings and welcome. My name is Jake Rayson. I'm a forest gardener and a forest garden designer. And this today is a short course on forest gardening. I am aiming to get it all done within 30 minutes. Just 30 minutes. This is a 3.5 hour online course that I have, the Backyard Forest, condensed into half an hour. So this really is a super fast going through the whole of my kind of forest gardening course, all the kind of stages of creating a forest garden in 30 minutes. So without further ado, let's dive straight in. There are 3 stages to the course to kind of understanding it. And these kind of overlap, and it's an ongoing process. When you're creating a garden, it really is, it's a process. It's not a finished thing, and it's a spiral. You end up in the same place over and over again, but you are actually kind of getting better and things are improving. So it's a spiral up. You kind of plan things, you structure things, you cultivate things. So it's divided up into 3 distinct stages but overlapping and related stages. The first stage is to plan, and this is like knowing about forest gardening, what makes forest gardening special. It's knowing. It's about creating a map and a plan of the land that you want to develop, and and how it all kind of fits together, and then creating a map from it and putting all that information onto the map. And then it's about designing. This is about where can you put stuff. I have purposefully left out specific species. There is a lot of information, which I will come to in a second. There is a lot of information about species. I won't cover species, I don't think hardly at all, because there isn't the time to do it here. Kind of 3 key things really. It's native where possible. I'm a big proponent of using native plants where possible, because native plants support wildlife as they have co-evolved with wildlife. So if you've got a choice, you've got an option, it's that use native plants where you can. Not saying exclusively native, it's just saying where you can use native plants. And a diversity of species, a diversity of habitats, and a diversity of crops as well is fantastic. Main thing, diversity, that's a key to it. And then we're looking at the structure. So the structure is actually when you get it out into the field, and there's kind of 3 things that I say get the structure sorted out. The first thing that you do is put up your protection. This predominantly means protecting from the wind and any kind of structures that you have, like greenhouses or polytunnels. Second thing is get your veg going, get your perennial veg going, get a crop going close to the house, and start growing your perennial vegetables, and then you'll get a crop, because it'll take a few years for you to get a crop from your trees. Third thing is to plant your canopy layer. This is putting in your big trees, putting in your trees. So you can then, what I have done in a garden here, you can then leave the garden for a while, and with the canopy, and you can just, like, if it's grass, you can just mow around it, or you're just going to keep the bramble down or whatever it is whilst the tree's established. And then you can come to the 3rd stage when you're ready. So this is a nice thing, is like you can do it when you've got the time, and this can take years. This has taken, like, we've been here for 6 years. This has taken quite a lot of time. With a lot of land, it takes a lot longer to go through the stages. If you've got a smaller amount of space and more time and more resources, it can be much quicker. But this is a nice way of breaking it down. So when I talk about cultivating, this is like you have the canopy layer. You've got your windbreaks in for the canopy layer, protecting the trees. And then you can start to cultivate the ground. So you prepare the ground, you clear the ground. Normally people have got grass or some sort of grass, or it might be bramble or what have you. You clear the ground, then you put in plant the shrubs, and you put in your ground cover. So those are kind of 3 layers: canopy, shrubs, ground cover. And then you rinse and repeat, go through the whole cycle again. So remember, plan, structure, cultivate. These are the 3 stages. And what I am going to say, which I was supposed to get down, excuse me, looking at that, buy this book, Creating a Forest Garden. I'm on a not commission for it. I'm not on a commission for it at all. Martin Crawford's book. It's fantastic. Lots of different species in there, lots of different stages, and that's great. So buy that book. And then also I have a forest garden spreadsheet which lists all the plants in the order that they appear in this book. All the plants that appear in this book are on the spreadsheet, and this is forest garden spreadsheet. I should put a big link there so you can copy it down. I won't do that now. Cool. So plan. First of all, plan. Why forest garden? Basically, climate emergency. It's taking action locally to do something about it. There's an ecological and climate emergency. We have plant species and animal species at a massive decline across the world, in the UK as well, and we're heading for a 3.5 degrees Celsius by 2050. There's kind of disagreement. Is it going to be 1.5 or 2 or 3 or 3.5 or 4? If it's that much, we're absolutely, we're done for as a species. So we need to do something, and the forest garden is part of this because it's changing the way that you're thinking about how you live, how you garden, how you get your food, how you care for wildlife, how you live. So this is the thing. This is what drives me. It's an ecological and climate emergency, and I really want to start planting now for the future to have a fighting chance in 30 years' time. This is only 30 years away. You really are going to be thankful for resilient crops. I can tell you that for nothing. So, and what is a forest garden? I'm going to go through. There's 2 words I use to describe it in real shorthand. It's an edible ecosystem. So you want to create an ecosystem, you want a diversity of wildlife, but it just so happens to be that you can eat most of the stuff in there, or it's useful in some way. You can get timber from it, or poles, or string, or medicines, or herbs, or whatever the harvest is. Massive range of plants that you can grow for a massive range of different reasons, but edible ecosystem is a kind of handy little way of remembering it. And this kind of broadens the definition of a forest garden into different climates. But really, we're talking about, for a forest garden as it's understood in the UK, we're talking about a cool, temperate. That's the name of the climate. It's a cool, temperate climate. We're talking about kind of trees and perennials, and what you're doing is you're growing edible crops in a wildlife garden. So you provide for the wildlife. You think about the whole garden as an ecosystem. You're well on the way to creating a low maintenance and productive garden. So that's the kind of essence of it. I'm just going to go through the characteristics of a forest garden. So firstly, it's sustainable. There's very few inputs coming in. It's all kind of self-sustaining. You have the fertility is provided by mineral accumulators and nitrogen fixers. So like all the fertility, like the potassium and the nitrogen, comes from plants within the garden. You're not importing compost. You're not importing fertilizer. Pest control is wildlife predators for pest control. So you create habitat, for example, hoverflies that eat. What do hoverflies eat? Greenfly, I think. Greenfly, and possibly, or it might be hoverfly larvae that eat. Ladybird larvae eat greenfly. Anyway, you make the habitat for the wildlife. They will eat the pests. You get balance in your garden. It's all about the kind of balance of it. There's a permanent living mulch ground cover. You've got plants totally permanently covering the ground. You don't have any bare earth anywhere in a forest garden, and you have trees and perennial plants and shrubs. They sequester more carbon because there's a lot more they're established. There's a lot more carbon being sequestered into the ground, and you're encouraging diversity at all times. And it's low maintenance as well, so that's sustainable. It's easy to sustain it at that level. You've got to get it to a level where you have a functioning ecosystem and it's balanced, and then it's very low input to keep it maintained there. A lot of work to get there in the first place, but it's low maintenance when you're there. It's productive, so you're getting into crop from it, whether it's an edible crop or whether it's wood, canes, dyes, medicines, herbal stuff. And it's multi-layered, so you're using all the available space efficiently with minimum input coming in. And it's wildlife friendly by design. The whole point is that you are creating an ecosystem. So it's designed for wildlife, and it's native plants where possible because they've co-evolved with the local wildlife. You want a big kind of bulk. So for me, I'm exploring using more native ground covers like ground ivy in the UK, Glaucoma heteracea, or it's using native plants for windbreak, so dogwood, native dogwood, Cornus sanguinea, or what's the other stuff called? Gelder rose, Viburnum opulus, or sea buckthorn, or there's a kind of range of wild privet, or there's a whole range of different plants that you can use in the UK, like UK natives in a UK garden. And the whole idea is you're creating that ecosystem. It's layers, as well as I said before. It's multi-layered, and there are like 7 different layers. But basically, if you remember, canopy, shrubs, ground cover. There you go. And there's some herbaceous perennials. Herbaceous perennials are plants that die down in the winter and then grow back. So, for example, Caucasian spinach, or I don't know, asparagus, or anything like that, Turkish rocket. So, canopy, shrubs, ground cover, and herbaceous perennials. So those are the kind of 3 basic levels, and it's perennial. Generally we're looking at using perennial plants. There's a good place for annual plants as well, but they're not the focus. Annual plants are kind of fillers for spaces which are developing. So you might have a temporary ground cover, or you might have some flowers like I use foxglove. Which is a biennial, which lives for about 2 years. I use foxglove in combination with lesser periwinkle, Vinca minor, because it provides some cover for the Vinca, for the periwinkle, whilst it gets established. So there is a space for annuals in a forest garden as well. Now the guidelines, these are things that you can remember these are the kind of things. Do come back to these slides, because all this information is here, and there's lots of links off to other places as well. But they're kind of 4 guidelines. I just say always bear these things in mind when you're creating a forest garden. The first thing is protect. Really cannot be overemphasized the importance of mostly windbreaks, but and also from the cold as well. Wind is, if you have windbreaks in, whether that's a windbreak hedge, which is what you want is a windbreak hedge, or a nurse tree, which is a temporary kind of little windbreak in front of a specific tree, or a dead hedge. I use them an awful lot around here. Whilst things get established, you create using old branches, old bits of bramble and everything. You put like a mound with some stakes. You put a mound in front of a tree. Protect from the wind. That's a kind of one of the key things. If you've got any way exposed, you want to kind of close the gaps, and you want to provide that protection. If you provide the protection, your trees will thank you for it so much more, and things will grow so much faster. It's worth the investment at the beginning to put in your windbreaks. And also think about the structures as well for protecting from the cold. So greenhouses, polytunnels, cold frames, potting sheds, that kind of thing. Spacing is the next one. So you can see from this illustration here, it's really, the important thing is to have, we are emulating the edge of a woodland with a forest garden in a cool temperate climate. And the key thing, it's the spacing. You want to leave enough spacing between the trees, and the rule of thumb is 1/4 to 1/2 of the average canopy diameter. So you've got 2 4-meter trees. You're looking at about a space of about 1 to 2 meters. Some trees are really tall, like an Italian alder, and you can what's called raise the canopy, where you take off the lower branches. It lets in more light. So it depends. It depends if you're on a slope as well, then you can put more trees together. Or if you're northern slope, then you have to have a bit more spacing to get more light in. But it's roughly, this is a kind of rule of thumb. So really, really important. Get the spacing right. Do check your rootstocks for cultivated fruit trees. They are grafted onto a rootstock, and it's the rootstock that determines the height and the diameter and the vigor of the tree. So make sure you've got the right rootstock, that you haven't got something massive going into a small space. Make sure you've got a small rootstock for a small space and a big rootstock for a big space if you want it. And then do check, there's a fantastic website called Plants for a Future, and also on the RHS Plant Finder. All this is available in the notes. If you press P, I should have said this at the beginning, then the notes will come up and it's got all the links in there. Do check the sizes of the diameter on these two websites, Plants for a Future and RHS. And I'll do this. Will this work? And yeah. Oh, there's checking the rootstock size. Cool. And ground cover. Keep the ground permanently covered. In the first instance, you're using a mulch. And with an annual ground cover, I use white mustard is the best here in West Wales. The best temporary ground cover is white mustard, and that grows up, and it gives a chance for the permanent ground cover to get established. I use bark or wood chip. Generally, I prefer bark. It lasts, in my experience, it lasts longer, takes longer to break down, gives the permanent ground cover a chance to get established. And then nutrients. Work out a nutrient budget, roughly how many nitrogen fixing trees you need to have. So there's kind of two main nutrients that you're looking at. There's nitrogen, which is any member of the pea family, like Scotch broom, and then there's alders, any kind of member of the alder family, like Italian alder, and any member of, and then there's sea buckthorn also fixes nitrogen as well. Those are the three I can think of off the top of my head. And then potassium, generally you're talking about comfrey. There's Bocking 14, which is a sterile comfrey. Doesn't self-seed, not really big issue in a forest garden anyway because it's permanent ground cover. But you want to have big clumps of that. I plant a clump of comfrey next to each tree, and then I've got, I don't know, 2 or 3. I've got quite a few nitrogen fixing bushes. Oh, autumn olive is another one as well. So autumn olive, sea buckthorn, Italian alders, and I have them dotted around the forest garden. But just kind of work out roughly how many you need for the space that you've got. Okay, and then map. So we've done all that. Those are the kind of guidelines. Keep coming back to them, and then we'll move on. So now we're going to move on to the map and observations. Make a map. Even if it's a sketch, it doesn't really matter. Just a rough sketch is better. I'll show you a rough sketch, actually. This is how rough it can be. I'm doing some work for... can you see that? Is that on? There you go. Look, that's how rough it is. It's just a sketchy sketch. I'm doing some work with the local school, setting up a forest garden for them. And I'm just doing... I will do like a full-on plan for them, really, but... You don't need to. You can use a sketch. I would say work out your scale. Look this up online. There will be kind of a lot of information about how to draw a scale diagram. Essentially, I think the best paper for doing this is 5mm squared paper. If you can get hold of A3 5mm square paper, that'll cost a few quid, and then you can use that as a basis for your plan. Most people have got kind of regularly shaped gardens, which makes life a lot easier. This is actually a garden from friends of mine in North London, and it's quite an easy garden to create the shape for. And you work out your scale. I'll let you do that, but work out your scale. So this scale is 1 to 100, which means, oh crikey, 1 meter equals 1 centimeter, I think. 1 to 50 means 1 meter equals 2 centimeters. Maths is not my strong point, but do work out a scale plan. And the reason for this is that then you can just try out different ideas, and you can get a much better idea of how big a tree is. I'll come on to this in a minute, how big a tree is and where it fits into that map. So make a map. A simple paper map is perfectly adequate. It's for your eyes only. It's not for show. It's not for showing anyone else. It's so that you can get ideas about what plants will fit where. Yeah, that's all it is. So you can draw a circle and say, this is how big a circle is. Like it's a 2 meter diameter tree. That means it's 4 centimeters at 1 to 50. And then you can make a circle, cut out a rough circle, and then try it in different positions and places in the garden and see if it fits. Okay, and then observations. I've got a checklist PDF with all this information on, which you can download. This is really, really critical. I think there's a real temptation to rush in to plant stuff in your garden. Resist the temptation. Observe what is there. I'll just whiz through the different observations. So firstly is the aspect of your land. This really, really, really is so important. Where does the sun come from? What place, where are you in relation to the compass? So south, you want to get maximize your light. So the south, the sun in the south, that's where you get your maximum light. North you don't. So generally you plant your taller trees at the back and your shorter stuff at the front. Okay. West, light from the west is more valuable than light from the east because you get more photosynthesis because the air has warmed up by the afternoon. This means plants can photosynthesize more readily in the afternoon than they can in the morning when the air is cold. They don't like the process of photosynthesis doesn't really take place then. So where are you in relation to that? So you can see from the map, I always kind of do it north to south, but you might want to change the orientation so you get an idea of where the sun is coming from. You don't want to block stuff out. The elevation, where the slope, kind of how high you are up, the better views you have. Like we've got a nice view, but with a view comes the weather, so it's a bit of a double-edged sword. And the slope, so like anything over 20 degrees is actually really, really hard to work. So we've got some land here is about 25 degrees, and it's hard work. It's hard work on my knees to go up and down. Whereas the flatter it is, actually the easier it is to work as well. And then look at mark up the position. Download this PDF actually. Just click on the link and download it. And then you can go through this. There's kind of stuff there as well that you can look at and links you can go to. Elements, water. Where is the water on your land? Where does water collect in the winter? Are there any kind of temporary? We've got a stream that runs out the side of the back door. Wind, where's the prevailing wind direction? Here in West Wales, the wind comes from the southwest, so it comes straight up the valley. Sun, again, as I was saying, there's where is the sun in the sky? There's a fantastic app called Sun Surveyor. There will be other ones as well, and it tells you where the sun is in the sky at what time of day, but also what time of year. So then you can kind of work out, if you put a tree there, will that block out the sun for the rest of the garden? So you go, oh yeah, it will. I'll move the tree somewhere else. And the earth, what soil you have. I will come on to this in. Yeah, so what's the pH of the soil, and what soil type? Is it clay? Is it loam? Is it sandy? Those are kind of three main types of soil. And then look at the existing features. So existing wildlife. Don't just rip everything out because that is somebody's home. You've got a big bramble patch there. You don't really want to have bramble, but also you're going to have a lot of animals living in that bramble patch. So be aware of what you already have. Likewise, a hawthorn tree is a fantastic wildlife tree. You might go, hawthorn, I'll go saw it down and cut it down. You might want to keep it. Yeah. So it depends on your space. It depends upon your time and what else you're going to plant in its place. But do be aware. I'm kind of really, really aware. I'm cutting bramble back so I can plant trees, but this bramble is somebody's home. I found an old blackcap's nest, last year's nest, I think, luckily. But so yeah, do be aware of it. Where are the utilities? Where are the water pipes? You don't want to, and if there's any underground cables and sewage. You don't want to plant a tree directly over a sewage pipe. Yeah, so be aware of that. And also above as well, you don't want to plant a tree directly beneath a electricity line. Where existing structures, old bases for greenhouses. And access points. Do you have any public footpaths? Is there kind of access from the back of the garden? What's the relationship with the road? All that kind of, are there holes in the fence? All that kind of thing. And then looking at your situation finally is where you are in relation to the kind of the landscape and your neighbours and any kind of industry, any agriculture, how much privacy you've got, if there's any noise coming from anywhere. And smell, we get treated to regular slurry applications on the field. So you've done that, you made your observations, you've downloaded the checklist of the PDF, and then you go on to the wish list. What do you want? There are 3 things that you want. Firstly is wildlife. So garden for wildlife. Think about creating habitat for wildlife. As I said before, creating an ecosystem. So make a list of the things that you want to create. So nest boxes, a pond. Number 1, get a pond if you possibly can. Get a pond. They're brilliant. Nutrients. Where do you want to get the nutrients from in the garden? Seating areas, really, really important to think about where you're going to sit. Very nice thing to do is to say, when I have a coffee in the morning, okay, coffee, whatever, if you have a drink in the morning, whatever it is that you drink, if I have a coffee in the morning, where can I go on a summer's morning? Is there anywhere I can go to drink my cup of coffee in the sun? And then likewise, when it's wine o'clock in the evening, where is the sun, the setting sun? Is there anywhere I can sit in a nice little environment and have a sip of glass of wine or cocktail or fizzy elderflower, whatever it is that you like to have at the end of the day? So those 2 kind of nice ways of thinking about how people will use the space. And then think about structures as well, how the space is used. People use spaces in so many different ways. You might have so many different things going on. Here, for example, I'm actually growing quite a lot of plants for other jobs. So I have quite a big propagation area because it's not the plants aren't just for me and all the massive space that I've got to fill up with plants. So that's quite a big thing for me, is a propagation area. I've started making cold frames. I really love a potting shed, but can't afford one at the moment. But your requirements will be different. So whether you want a greenhouse for tomatoes, or whether you want a space to put things. So think about the structures, think about sheds and all that kind of thing. Next thing is plant wish list. Plants for a future. Brilliant website. Did I open it up? I did open it up. Yay. Go here. Have a look at this. It's fab. There's thousands of plants on there. There's a load of native plants, UK native plants as well. So it's really, really good resource. Build up a wish list of the plants that you want. And what I would say as well is Pinterest. Pinterest is it's a bit commercial, but it's a very easy way of collecting images from around the internet. You go, I'd love to see what an Italian order looks like, and then you can say, yay, Italian order. This is what an Italian order looks like, and you can add it, and you can add pictures of seating. I'm not going to go on now, actually, it's not working. Pictures of seating and pictures of setups and greenhouses and whatever, ponds, wildlife ponds, and you get some ideas and get some inspiration about what other people are doing. So make a wish list of all these things, for the wildlife, for the structures, and for seating, for the plants, and then compile them into a kind of use something to collect pictures together as well. So moving on to the design side of it, all design is, and I say this as an ex-design, well, kind of a garden designer and ex-graphic designer, design is purposefully putting things in the right place. And what is the right place is the $1 million question. Don't plant a massive tree in front of your front door, because that would be a disaster. So yeah, put the things in the right place. This is my friend Dan's paper plan. I think it's brilliant. And this is what I was saying earlier on about the map. When you're creating a map, you kind of cut out circles, scale circles for the trees that you want, with the rootstock that you want, and then you can move them around and you can see where they fit in the garden. Yep. So it's a good thing to do. Really, really recommend doing this. Is getting the design down on paper. So you've got your map. You add your observations from your PDF checklist, and you say, oh, okay, this is where the sun rises, this is where the sun sets, so north and south, and then this is where the wind comes in, this is where the slope is. Then you add your wish lists, and you say this is like your green circles and your plants, and your light green is your hedges. And the kind of key thing really is it's the big stuff that you want to think about. It's like the canopy layer and the canopy layer and the windbreaks are the kind of 2 big things. Do not, always kind of do bear in mind that you can design on the ground. The smaller the space you've got, you might not necessarily need to kind of always use a piece of paper. You can just go out into the garden with a bit of string and kind of measure things up and see if a tree will fit in a certain space, and do it by eye, do it on site. Sometimes with a bigger space, the bigger the space, the easier it is to design on paper. And then this is the kind of design order. This is a kind of really yeah, for me is like the really, really kind of interesting kind of process when I'm doing a design. One of the first things that I do is to create paths, is to make a route for the paths to go down. Um, this is, crikey, it's 10:30 already. Okay, let's go. So create paths on your design, work out and do it on the site and in real life as well. Work out where you walk and work out where you want to walk to, whether it's sipping your cocktail in the evening or whether it's potting plants up in the polytunnel or whatever it is, but work out where the paths go. And I use, if you have got grass, and I use a lawnmower, as you can see in this picture here, I use a lawnmower to work out the paths. You can try out different paths in different locations and say, oh, that works, or that doesn't work, and it'll feel right, yeah. And then the paths naturally make the areas. So it's always a very good idea to break the garden down in the same way that you're breaking down the process from plans, structure and cultivate. In the same way, you want to break the garden up into this kind of like, they're all related, but it's all part of the same garden, but different areas, and you can work on one area, finish that, go on to the next area. Yeah, it makes it a lot easier. Attach the structures. I mean, I put the structures onto the map, and then try trees out, circles of paper. Try the trees out in different positions. So whether that's on paper or in real life, you put the trees down. Cool. There we go. So that's design done. On to structure. We get out in the field and we start planting stuff. Now we know where the windbreaks are going to go. Number one important thing, windbreaks. Planting windbreak hedge. This is Japanese rose, Rosa rugosa. Martin Crawford's, one of Martin Crawford's sites down in North Devon, who's a very famous forest gardener. And it's a windbreak hedge. And yes, so planting windbreak hedges, I'll come on to the kind of the detail. Dead hedges are brilliant. I love dead hedges. I'll just very quickly show you a quick picture of a dead hedge. Yeah, so this is the first dead hedge I ever made. Sticks in the ground, branch in between, that's protecting a bamboo. And nurse tree, so a nurse tree is like a small kind of shrub tree thing. I use Scotch broom quite a bit to plant in front of a tree to give it some protection. To be honest, I use dead hedges more than I do nurse trees because I've got quite a lot of old branches and things that I can use for it. And then polytunnels as well. You can plant very sensitive plants in a polytunnel. So to calculate the windbreak height, this is really kind of important thing to remember. The height of a windbreak protects for 8 times the length. So if you have a 2 meter high windbreak, it will protect 2 8s of 16 meters from that windbreak. Yep. So 2 meters high protects 16 meters long. And then you can have a sequence. You can either have like a 4 meter, 4 8s of 32. 4 meter high will protect 32 meters along, but it will cast more shade. Or you can have a 2 meter hedge high, and then you have another 2 meter hedge in 16 meters, and then another 2 meter hedge in 16 meters. So you can have a sequence of windbreaks, and that extends the protection as well. If it's windy and you have the space for it, I really would recommend having a double thickness hedge. So you kind of staggered, zigzaggy planting them. And a variety of species as well. I've got like a mixed hedge. It's good to have a mixed hedge because you get a diversity of different species and stuff flowers at different times of the year and provides a diversity of habitat too. When you're the aspect dictates a height, but by this means the height of the hedge, the windbreak hedge that you're putting in. If you on the north, you can have a really big windbreak hedge. At the back of the garden, you have a big windbreak hedge because the sun, is never there. It doesn't block out. It blocks out the neighbour, but it doesn't block out any light on your garden. So the taller hedges to the north and the east, because the eastern sunlight's not so valuable. And you can calculate the sunlight. And this is a screenshot I was using of some sun survey, and you can calculate the sunlight at different times of the day and also different times of the year as well. And check the prevailing wind using a meteorological service which you can find online. Windbreak profile and gaps. You don't want to have gaps in your windbreak, otherwise wind will funnel through and actually speed up. So you want to have different types. So you can have a vertical profile is better protection. So rather than having a ramp profile, you have a straight up profile. Baffle island is where you have a gap, and then you have a tree behind a hedge behind it, just behind the gap. A staggered gap is what you can see here, where it's like that, and an angle gap is just like a bit more of an angle if you haven't got much space. Cool. So those are your windbreaks. On to perennial vegetables. There's kind of three things: windbreaks, perennial vegetables, and the canopy layer. The perennial vegetables, really key thing. Coming back to paths again. Get your paths in. Get access to your vegetables so you can check them, so you can weed them. Perennial vegetables got a higher maintenance than your kind of fruit trees or your nut trees or or a lot of shrubs. So you want paths and you want access to them, and signage. So signage so that you can see where stuff is, and people, other members of the family who might not know what things are, can say, "Oh, there is a cabbage plant. Go and pick me some cabbage." And close to the kitchen. Again, perennial vegetables tend to be closer to the living space because you're using them more regularly than, say, for example, apple trees could be further away because you only pick them certain times of the year and you only prune them like once a year. So attention is absolutely critical. The veg links for the there's a lot of information out there about perennial vegetables. These are the 5 best resources: Alison Tyndale, Backyard Larder, Mandy Barber, Incredible Vegetables, Stephen Barstow, Edimentals, Ornamental Edible Ornamentals, has a Facebook group as well. Stephen Barstow does, so that's worth looking up if you are on evil Facebook. Alan Carter of Plums and Pig Nuts. There's loads of information on there, but I haven't even started exploring all of it. And again, plants for a future. Onto the canopy layer. Windbreaks. Again, windbreaks. Spacing, 1/4 to 1/2 of the average diameter. Choose the right rootstock and think about when you're planting stuff out, and this is part of the design process as well, think about a pollinating partner. Most fruit trees require, most fruit trees require a pollinating partner, so a genetic, a partner, a tree which will be able to pollinate it. If some trees are self-fertile, but I think pretty much all trees benefit from having a pollinating partner. So you kind of get cross-pollination, you get better fruiting. So do think about pollinating partners. And always measure twice, plant once. This is an old adage from tailors, I think. Measure once, twice, cut once. Measure twice, plant once. And when you're out and about in the field, make sure you measure physical in real life, because your map's always going to be out a bit. So measure twice, plant once, make sure you get the right place for it. On to cultivate. So you've done your plan, you've got your windbreaks in, you've got your veg started, and then you've put in your canopy layer. We're going to start the cultivating. So this is actually cultivating the space underneath. You don't have to do this straight away. This can take this can be left for a while, so which is the lovely thing about a forest garden. It doesn't have to all be done at once. So paths are fantastic. Paths, as I was saying before, define the areas. Grass, Grass paths are good because they're cheap and they're robust, but grass creeps. Yeah, grass, like in this photograph here, this is the polytunnel. Grass creeps over to the polytunnel. So I've got a war on grass. I'm reducing the amount of grass I've got in the polytunnel in the forest garden, reducing the width of the paths to like 1 or 2 lawnmower widths to reduce the amount of mowing that I have to do. And then high traffic areas, I'm putting wood chip down. So like this is around by the kind of compost area, I put wood chip down, and there's some ground cover here. And you can also use hard surface as well, but this is obviously it's more expensive to and more labour to install it. But you might want hard surface like a flat level area where you have some seating, for example. And timing, again, by putting paths in, it really helps divide the garden up and deal with one area at a time. I made the mistake of trying to do it all at the same time. What you really want to be doing is to do one area at a time, because there's a lot to go in. When you're planting out the ground cover plants, which give a permanent living ground cover in the forest garden, you're planting out about 3 to 5 plants per square metre. So that's a lot of plants. So 10 metres by 10 metres, 100 metres square, I think, yeah. That's like 400 plants. And that's a lot of plants to kind of propagate. And you really do need to propagate these things yourself. If you were to buy them, you can buy plug plants is one way of doing it if you've got the money. You can get them for about 70 pence per plug, but still that's £2.80 per square metre. So it adds up. So propagating them yourself, and again, to propagate that many plants takes quite a lot of time. So do it one area at a time. So get sort out the timing in advance when you're going to do stuff. And when you plant out ground cover, you want to plant ground cover and trees in the best time to do it. Trees are a bare root in the winter, and ground covers in the late autumn when it starts raining. September, October kind of time, where the soil's still warm, but there's some moisture. So that's kind of ideal time, or in early spring, but ideally autumn is when you want to plant out ground cover. So you've got all the grass, you've got your propagation going on. Do you want so I'm going to deal with grass because that's the most common kind of setup. If you've got a small area, manual deturf. So sharpened spade, a turf cutter, like a manual turf cutter or a sharpened spade. It's a lot of work. I'm doing something at the moment. It's a lot of work, but if it's a small area, it's the easiest thing to do. Cardboard, if you've got like a larger area and you've got the time, put cardboard down, double thickness, weigh it down, and suppress the plants underneath. That is like one of the best ways of doing it. You can do like a method where you put soil on top and then grow a ground cover straight into the soil on top of the cardboard, but that gets expensive in terms and the quantity of topsoil or compost that you need to put on top of it. So cardboard mulch, kill off the grass underneath it. Takes about 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. It's quicker in the summer when the grass is growing and it's drier, dries it out, kills it off quicker. And then if you've got a big area, I've stopped using plastic sheet mulch, woven plastic sheet mulch, because it's plastic and it doesn't go anywhere. It goes in landfill, so I'm not going to use it anymore. I'm going to use a mini digger to scrape the top layer. You're getting rid of a load of nutrients, which is a pain. I'm putting them into, I'm creating mounds for windbreaks for next to the paths, like miniature mounds for windbreaks and little miniature windbreak hedges. But this is what I would recommend doing if you've got a large area that you want to do. Propagate, much cheaper. Now, don't be put off. Always, when you propagate stuff, this is Cornicera here. This is red dogwood, really easy to propagate. Chuck it in the ground, mulch it, or put it into pots. Same with black currants. You can chop off branches and stick them in. But aim for easy plants. Yeah. Don't worry about complicated plants. Aim for easy plants, and there's a range of different ways of propagating. Look at the RHS website for methods of propagating. Go for easy plants, native plants, because they will be around and you can propagate them easily, and ground cover plants. As I said before, you're using 3 to 5 ground cover plants per square meter. Those are the plants you really want to concentrate on propagating, whereas trees are kind of like, you don't need so many of them. So I would say concentrate on ground cover plants. And when it comes to planting, this is the kind of order that you do things in. First of all, you've take up your cardboard mulch, or you scraped all the grass off with a mini digger, or you've done it by hand, and then you put down a layer of bark mulch. Then you can see here, I don't know if you can see, I've done a chalk circle around a bit of bamboo where at the position for the shrub, and then you plant the shrubs in there just to make sure there's enough of a gap. Then you put in the ground cover at about 3 to 5 plants per square meter, and then I sow a temporary ground cover. And what I use an awful lot is white mustard, which is much cheaper if you buy it in bulk from, for example, cotswoldseeds.com. And if you've got a large area to do, it's much cheaper to buy it in bulk. And then you sow that on top of the bark, and it comes up, and it just allows the ground cover underneath to get established. So your actual shrubs can be used for 3 different things: soft root, windbreak, and nitrogen fixing. And some plants will do all of this. So autumn olive does all this. It's called, in permaculture terms, it's called a stacking function. So you're doing more than one thing. And also black currants, either black currants like nitrogen fixing. Sea buckthorn is soft fruit, windbreak, nitrogen fixing, and it's a native, UK native as well. So those are the kind of 3 things that you can do with shrubs. Look at Plants for a Future, loads of different options. Look at the Creating Forest Garden book as well for the idea of species, and look at the Forest Garden spreadsheet. And then weeding. Finally, you do need to weed. A forest garden is a low maintenance garden. It's not a no maintenance garden. The 4 things that I weed here are saplings. You'll get ash saplings and sycamore all over the place. Grass comes up everywhere. I want to get rid of grass. Brambles are a pain in the bum, but yeah, you need to dig out the actual roots. And dock, Rumex. Oh, what the hell is it? There's the common dock in the UK, which kind of gets established and is. It's not so much of a pain. Yeah, you have to dig out the big roots, but it can swamp other plants as well. So those are the 4 plants that I come out. For all of those, you need to pull them out. Whereas other plants like plantain, I leave an awful lot of stuff. I leave dandelions, and I leave plantain, and I leave geranium. What's it called? Germander speedwell. But if you do want to plant something else in that spot and it's taken over a bit, you can do scissor weeding, which is where you cut the. You don't need to pull out the plant, just cut it. The top dies back, the roots are weakened, and eventually they die after enough times. And your plants that you want to come through will come through, and it doesn't disturb the soil as well. And another thing as well for weeding is using a mulch for feeding trees. As I said before, I plant a Bocking 14 comfrey next to each fruit tree, and then just once or twice a year I'll chop it back and then just lay it around the base of the tree. And this also suppresses any kind of other plants growing around the base of the tree too. So there we go. Let's break it down. So break down plan, phase, structure, which is your windbreaks, your perennial veg and your canopy, and then the cultivate, where you're actually cultivating the area underneath the canopy layer. So you're putting in the shrubs and the ground cover. So plan, structure, cultivate. Thank you very much for watching. Here's some reference links on here as well. And that's me done for 6 minutes. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you again soon.